Back with the Formula One focus. As Hendrik said to Tatus again, we had a bit of a controversial weekend, lots of penalties being applied, and not so much the penalties themselves as harsh they were, in my opinion. And welcome back, Hendrik. Tell me, am I wrong? Am I right? Is there a bit of a vendetta going or not really?
Well, hi, nice to join you again. Yeah, I think everybody's getting a little bit too hysterical about what happened in terms of all the penalties and things like the safety car and that sort of thing. And on top of that, the news that did break over the last week about the senior management reshuffling going on at the FIA's executive level, people getting fired and no explanation given, stuff like that. So there's a kind of a perception that at least as far as the FIA's involvement in a race is concerned, that things are in shambles, that there's chaos going on, and so therefore, things seem to be out of control. I think that's a hysterical reaction to things that are not necessarily connected. And also where people tend not to have the perspective of looking back and maybe understanding that there's a bit of a context involved in many of these things. Having said that, there is of course a real reason to complain and to be unhappy about the one decision by the new Formula One race controller, Marquez, and I'll get to that. So maybe we should just stand back a little bit and just have a look at the situation. There are three main elements as far as I'm concerned in this whole situation when we look at what happened off track this weekend. I'm not talking about the race itself yet. There is clearly destabilization at senior level, at the executive level at the FIA, with the president being roped into all kinds of controversies over the course of the season so far, and last weekend or the build up to last weekend, we also got the news, and we spoke about it last week, about people being fired seemingly willy-nilly because no reasons are given. We cannot fathom the reasons because they are not given. Senior positions being vacated, people getting fired, people resigning, and that sort of thing. And clearly that is an unsatisfactory situation. I think the second element should not be confused with that, and that is that yes, there is a line to be drawn from the firing of Niels Wittich to the appointment of Rui Marquez as the Formula One race controller or race director. But that doesn't necessarily mean that because there's turmoil at the top executive level at the FIA, that the decisions that somebody like Marquez makes is a direct result of that. He is a fairly experienced race director on junior level. Yes, it's a new situation for him, and yes, he did make a mistake. But I'm saying that it's not necessarily because there's destabilization going on at the executive level. And then there's the third element, and that's the stewards, the role of the stewards at the event. That's them that impose the penalties. That's them that decide how a driver should be penalized, because the race control, under the direction of the race director, of course, they only refer incidents and situations to the stewards. Excuse me. So race controllers got no role to play in the decision making as to what the penalty should be. So these are three different elements that one should not confuse with each other. Having said that, that doesn't mean that there's no grounds for criticism about some of these things. We've spoken about what's going on at the executive level at the FIA last week. Up to now, apparently the president, Ben Sulayem, has only granted a few interviews trying to explain the situation, not very satisfactorily, one should say. He basically said, he was quoted over the weekend, having spoken to one or two media outlets, that the way that he runs the FIA has got nothing to do with the drivers. It's not their business. They should stick with their business, which is true. I mean, he's the president of the FIA and he can run it the way he wants. But, it's the way that he says it. It's a sort of attitude that he has. So one can absolutely criticize that. As far as the decisions by Marquez are concerned, there is definite grounds for criticism as far as I'm concerned. for the decision not to employ or deploy the safety car when Alex Albon lost his wing mirror. And the wing mirror was lying there on which was not the racing line, but it was certainly the overtaking line into the only main overtaking spot on the track. And the justification that the FIA said afterwards, the explanation that they said why they didn't immediately deploy the safety car when they said that the policy basically is you do not deploy a safety car when there's small amounts of debris off the racing line. That is their sort of approach. In most cases, that is probably the correct approach, but in this case, it clearly wasn't the correct approach because that was, as we saw, that was the only place where drivers would go offline to overtake into turn one, and therefore the risk of anybody running over that piece of debris. And, it's a small mirror, but you hit that at 320 or more Ks an hour, that can do serious damage. Not only to the car, but possibly to people involved, marshals in the area and that sort of thing. So that is certainly a decision that was wrong, clearly, and the indecision that went around with that as well was clearly also wrong. Put out a flag and then double wave yellow, and then wait until somebody hits the debris, and then bring out the safety car. So that whole thing was completely unsatisfactory, and one should criticize that. Then, the penalties involved, I think the big one that people talk about, or the two big ones that people talk about over the weekend was Max Verstappen losing his pole position for holding up George Russell in qualifying. And the other one was, of course, the 10-second stop-go penalty for Lando Norris because he didn't lift for the double waved yellows for that debris. I think, again, one should take a little bit of a step back. The Max Verstappen situation, the way that the stewards explained it, again, it's the stewards that made this decision, not the new, let's call him a rookie race controller. And they took the decision to penalize Max for going too slowly, for driving unnecessarily slowly. Now, the definition of unnecessarily slowly in the rules is that the drivers are given a time that they need to, that they have to use to cover a specific distance. Okay, so in other words, they're given it a speed that they have to do. And if they go slower than that given speed for whatever reason, then they are liable for penalty. So what happened was that Max went slower than what they call the delta time. In that specific mini sector of the track. Yes, he slowed down because he wanted to get some space in front of him. Yes, he didn't want to, interfere with two guys ahead of him. Yes, he was aware of George Russell coming along, but he slowed down too much. Nobody complained about him slowing, but he slowed down too much, and that is what he was penalized for. You cannot just, go too slowly. Because that is a dangerous situation, and George had to try and he had to take avoiding action. So was that justified? In my view, yes, it was justified. It was only a one-place penalty, so it really wasn't such. It was a unique situation. I think it was the first time that anybody had been penalized for going too slowly when both drivers involved were on, a building up lap or the lap before they do the flying lap in qualifying. So that was unique, and I think that's why it took so long for them as well, because there wasn't a precedent. But the fact is that he did not, he did break the rules there. The situation between him and George, of course, escalated afterwards when they sat in the stewards' room and talked about the situation. That's a different discussion. The other one quickly, then, just Lando Norris. His team boss was very, very angry about it afterwards, that he was given the 10-second stop-go penalty, which is the second heaviest penalty that the driver can get. The heaviest is, of course, a black flag or disqualification. So he was just on the cusp of almost being disqualified. And I think Stella was so absolutely angry about it, because the whole thing cost them potentially the Constructors' Championship. I mean, Lando was on his way to finish on the podium, and now, because of the penalty, he dropped outside the top 10, and fortunately for him, he got back into the top 10 and set the fastest lap. So he did score some points. But okay, so why was he penalized? Because when a double waved yellow is shown, it means it is an extremely dangerous situation that the drivers should not only slow down but be prepared to stop. That is what the rules say. So whatever one thinks of whether it was justified to have the double waved yellow at the time, um, the fact is that is something that any driver, any racing driver on any level, even from a karting level, they know when you see a yellow flag or you see a double waved yellow, you have to slow down, you have to lift off. And because it could be that there are people on track, that there's a car upside down, whatever the case may be. So you have to be, and that is the rule. So you cannot have an exception to that, because the moment that you have an exception for something like the situation that we had on Sunday, where do you draw the line the next time? And the fact is that they were a precedent for that. It doesn't happen often because drivers know that they have to lift. So it doesn't happen that often. But there are two incidents in the past where drivers have been given the same penalty for exactly the same thing. And you cannot again make an exception. So it was completely justified as far as I'm concerned. And it is not part of some kind of a plan or a picture of chaos going on at the moment. It is not. So let's just be clear about that. That was a long story. I'm sorry for that, for the monologue, but I think one needs to just say these things.
The question for me is not so much the fact that there's chaos, but more of I get the impression of somebody trying to stamp his authority, and if you don't agree with him, you get shown the door. And the question I'm asking, you said is stewards making the decision. There is a rule book. Stella referred to the rule book being dusty because it hasn't been used. But like you said, there've been precedents in the past that this kind of penalty was applied. But in general, the penalties were more lenient in the past couple of years from what I'm asking. So is there any way, for example, that the stewards might get a briefing beforehand to say, listen, I want the penalties to be imposed or be a bit harsher. I want to just sort of, crack the whip a bit. The drivers have been getting a bit lenient, a bit too lackadaisical, they're ignoring the rules. We need to just crack the whip a bit. Is there any chance for that maybe happen?
I think it could happen. I think it's not inconceivable that the FIA president could say to the stewards on a given day, listen, guys, let's just be a little bit stricter on, I don't know, track limits or whatever the case may be. But that is also very, very marginal, because is that interference by the president or not? If it is interference, then it's a very serious situation. And there's an incident where there are all kinds of allegations. I think it was earlier this year. It could even be last year, when Ben Sulayem was accused of interfering with a decision by the stewards regarding, I can't quite remember, it was Fernando Alonso was involved, where he was penalized and the penalty was changed or whatever. If that was, and the allegation is that Ben Sulayem got involved and that it was on his instruction. If that is the case, then that is very serious, because it is not supposed to happen. The stewards are supposed to be independent in their decision making, not influenced by any factors, political or otherwise. That in theory. In practice, again, it's a fine line. If the president, happens to just walk past one of them in the paddock and just say, listen, let's just have a bit stricter application of the rules in this case. Again, if it is a serious case of interference, then I'm sure people would have laid a charge or complaint about it, and some action would have been taken. So, yeah, I'm not going to say it doesn't happen or it cannot happen, but to what degree? That's the question.
I don't have a problem with cracking the whip in theory. If things get a bit lackadaisical, a bit of discipline is not a bad idea. It's just a question of, number one, should it have been communicated a bit better? We don't know what was said in the driver's briefing, for example. They might have been told that this race is going to be approached a little bit differently. It just seemed to have caught a lot of people by surprise, the severity of the penalties more than anything else. I understand you're going with the president for the double waved yellows, and I don't think that's really under consideration or under discussion much. There's the fact of the matter is double waved yellows, like you said, dangerous situation, you back off. It's a karting error, it's a rookie error. You don't expect it from someone that was in the running for champion still, a week or two ago. The point was a surprise element almost. It's almost as if this was, that's the thing that I'm getting at. And I listened to the commentators on the race this weekend. They were all taken aback. David Coulthard was taken aback. Julian Palmer was taken aback. Not by the fact that the penalties were imposed, but by the severity.
Mm.
And that's the only question that I'm asking. And I'm wondering, once the whip has been cracked, now they know what to expect, then it's fine going forward. But I wonder if there was any sort of a warning given beforehand. That's basically what
Well,
I'm
I
getting
mean,
at.
there is a driver's briefing, usually on the Friday evening of the race weekend, where the race director would give the drivers his so-called race director's notes, and those tend to have different emphasis depending on who the race director is. It seems when Vittich took over from Michael Marcy, the emphasis from his side was more towards things like track limits than in the case of Marcy, and probably before that Charlie Whiting. Um, and now that Marquez has come in, he might have a different emphasis as far as the application of rules are concerned. In other words, under what circumstances will he refer an incident to the stewards, and what would he just let go as a normal racing situation? Those things will inevitably be different between the one person and the other. Wants to have is to have consistency. And I think that is probably the one thing that one can really throw at collectively at the stewards this year. That there's been a fair lack of consistency in terms of similar situations. Having said that, of course, it is not an ideal situation, because you have a group of stewards that rotate from event to event. So inevitably, you're going to have, just like any referee, in a football or a rugby match, you're going to have different interpretations. And also, one should also take into account, just like in any other sport where refereeing plays a big role, situations are very rarely absolutely identical in all aspects, in all respects. You can only have a broadly identical situation. So, again, that would lead to inconsistencies. And it's part of the sport. It's part of the sport, and one should accept that. I think glaring incidents of inconsistency, surely one should criticize that. And I think that's justified. So it's a big conversation that has been going on, I think, since the inception of the World Championship, probably. How do you deal with transgressions of the regulations? The whole approach has been that you add a regulation and then you add another regulation for a specific situation, and in that way, we have got a book of rules and regulations at the moment that I don't think anybody will know well enough in order not to doubt, not to put doubt on any decision.
I think the first thing they're going to change now is if a piece of debris is not on the racing line, but it's on a line that could be perceivably become the racing line, like you said just now on the straight, where people are being overtaken, they're going to change that rule now. Because strictly speaking,
Well,
that's what I'm
just
saying. Is now you have to keep adjusting and adjusting and adjusting. It's almost
yeah.
inevitable. Yeah, it's
But
not
just
realistic.
on that point, if you now have a rule that wherever the debris is, you have to have a safety car, people are going to complain about that.
No. I mean,
Why
just
did they
like
call a safety car? Why did they bunch up the drivers? Because there was a piece of plastic lying on the outside of a corner that nobody, or the inside of a corner where nobody would touch it. So you're going to have exactly the same argument again. Why did they call the safety car instead of why did they not call the safety car?
Yeah.
It's an almost impossible situation to rectify.
No, I'm just referring. I'm not saying, for example, on a corner. Clearly, that's different. But like that, now they could have foreseen that somebody might have, overtaken it. Yeah, that's what I'm getting at. But you just said the rule said if it's not on the racing line, don't bother with it. They're going to change it now to maybe look at. But anyway, it's a technical situation.
Not a rule. I think it's approach. It's rather an approach.
Yeah, I agree. So the point is, McLaren was firmly on the way to scoring the championship victory, getting it done. Lando was sort of poised to strike. He always does better towards the end of the race for some reason. And then he went and had a bit of a brain fade, call it that. red flag.
Mm.
He had missed and he made that stupid mistake. Long and the short of it, McLaren is not the champions yet. They're only 21 points ahead of Ferrari right now, and that Abu Dhabi is a circuit that's sort of suited more towards Ferrari than what Qatar was. Qatar was a McLaren circuit, so it's right down to the wire. It could potentially have been a seriously expensive mistake.
It could. It could. Yeah. Well, basically, what needs to happen, of course, is McLaren leading is currently by 21 points. So Ferrari has to finish, or take 22 points off them. They can do that by finishing 1 and 2, and McLaren 3 and 4. So it's quite possible. Just as an aside, if they do end up, on equal points, they, depending on who wins. If any of the two win, because any of the two teams may not win this race coming Sunday. It could be a Mercedes race. So if neither of the two teams win the race, they will end up equal on points, and they will also end up equal on wins. Both teams have 5 wins each. I've got this from somebody else. I didn't actually check it, but apparently McLaren has got more second places than Ferrari. So it'll go to a countback. Having said that, this weekend, of course, will be a little bit different than in the past. And I think what the team saw last weekend and in Qatar as well, is that the data that they have and the models that they had from the previous year simply did not work, because the previous year, the race was held much earlier under much, much warmer and very hot conditions. We remember what happened last year, the drivers almost passing out. This year, much cooler. In fact, 20 degrees Celsius ambient temperature and 20, 22, 23 degrees track temperature, as opposed to 45 the previous year. And the same goes for the Abu Dhabi race. Maybe not to the same degree because it's only about a week later, but it may still be a little bit cooler than they had last year. The conditions may be a little bit different than last year. So, it's not necessarily a given that what happened last year will be the same as this year. And I think I've mentioned this also, I think, in the past, that, we are now in a completely different competitive situation in terms of the teams and the cars that are competitive as opposed to what they were this time last year. So, what may be more predictable in 2023 may have been certainly not as predictable this year in 2024. We've seen small margins in setup differences make huge differences as far as the handling and the performance of the cars are concerned. So it's certainly not a given that anybody who's been strong there is going to be strong again.
Yeah, it's actually quite close in that sense. If I'm just trying to work out the permutations in my head. If Ferrari wins and they score the fastest lap, that's 44 points, 25 plus 18 plus 1.
Yeah.
So that means they're 23 points ahead of McLaren, which if McLaren scores 3rd and 4th place, they're going to score 27 points, which means they'll win.
Yeah.
If they're 3rd and 5th, that's going to be 15 plus 10 is 25, they'll still win. But if they're 3rd and 6th, the point is
there are many
win the race. Yeah.
All you need to do, well, as far as Ferrari is concerned, they need a 1-2. That's going to be the simplest way of doing it.
Yeah,
get a 1-2, you've got it.
Yeah.
Then you've got it done. It's as simple as that.
And the point is they can. This is a track that suits them.
Yeah.
Interesting. I love it. All right. Now, the other big competition, of course, is about 6th place. And here's Alpine from the nowhere. We thought the Brazil result was a bit of an outlier. And then in Las Vegas, Gasly finished well up in Q3. And then, I saw his engine actually blew up because of a slipstream that he got from Tsunoda, and the engine overrevved, basically. I don't know if you saw that. And then in Qatar, he was there on merit. He did extremely well. We talked about Ocon just now, but Alpine and Haas are basically the front runners now for 6th position. VCARB now looks to be almost out of the running, a bit further back. Interesting developments that. I mean, right towards the end, Haas was sort of sailing along, and then Alpine just came from nowhere.
Yeah, I think we mentioned it last week as well, that what happened in Qatar would be a confirmation or not of Alpine's upward trend. And I think it did. It did show that. Esteban Ocon a little bit, as an outlier there. But certainly Pierre Gasly, who's going to stay at the team, and so therefore I think it's logical that the last few races they would have emphasized him or his preferences. Alpine is in a good position as far as as far as sixth place is concerned, I see, I'm just checking, it's 5 points now between them, and then a few points further back, RB in eighth place.
Yeah.
So, but any one of those three, depending on what happens on track on Sunday, can still, clinch that sixth place. And I think you've done the maths or found the maths,
Mm.
what a sixth place would be worth,
Yeah.
or what the swing would be if you finish sixth between finishing sixth
Oh,
and sixth.
we can base it on last year. These are all estimates, and we don't know anything else about special payments and the like. Ferrari gets special payments, but sixth place last year was thought to have received $95 million, and eighth place received 78. So $17 million difference, huge
Yeah.
difference. Now that's a lot to play for, especially for the smaller teams. Like, especially I think Haas. Alpine has got a bit of factory backing. VCarb's got Red Bull behind it, but Haas is an independent team. They need that money from between second, sixth, and seventh. It's 95 and 87. It's $8 million. A lot of money.
Well, yes, of course you need the money, but there's also such thing as a budget cap. So if you're under that budget cap, this is very welcome. This kind of additional money can get you closer to the budget cap or the spending cap. If you are there already, or your budget for 2025 already makes provision for enough money to reach and maybe go beyond the budget cap, then it's a bonus. It's money that you can spend on other things, or that you can put in the kitty, because now Formula One teams, of course, are businesses, so they can make profits. So all of that makes a big difference. It really makes a big difference as far as the valuation of the teams is concerned as well.
Talking about money now, capital. We saw Donaldson putting another $100 and something million into Williams just the other day. And then Alpine is now, not Alpine, Audi has now announced they sold 30% to Qatari investment, Qatari investment firm, the government firm. The point that I'm making is that, they're capped 135 million or something like that. I'm not sure exactly what it is this year, but there's a limit also on capital expenditure. James Vowles has been heavily lobbying for them to be allowed to update their equipment, for example, to get on a par for Mercedes, for example. We remember when he went to Williams, he said he found machines there that haven't been in use for Mercedes for more than 20 years, but Williams is still using them on a daily basis. But that was also capped. There was a bit of an allowance for the smaller teams. The point is you can get as much money as you possibly can, but you're only allowed to spend so much money. I was wondering if Audi has now bought Sauber. Sauber is also a couple of years old. The technology might not be the newest. How much of that are they actually going to be allowed to spend on infrastructure to get them up to the same level as the big teams like Ferrari and Mercedes, for example?
Well, I've never been there, but I understand that the Hinwil operation is fairly up to date as far as the wind tunnel is concerned, and the computer systems that they have. It's fairly up to date, and of course, Audi will spend whatever they need to spend. The fact that they have now sold 30% of the shares to the Qatari, which is basically the state pension fund, if for lack of a better word, it's the state investment fund. That's got to do with ownership of the team. It's got to do with equity in the team. It's got to do with the valuation of the team, and it probably also allows Audi to get a little bit away from the current situation at Volkswagen Group. Volkswagen Group, we know, is in big trouble. It might be difficult internally for them, excuse me, for them to be able to sell the idea of spending millions and millions and millions, on a Formula One program where they have to close down factories and let people go. So if you have, additional capital coming in from the outside, that might relieve the situation a little bit. I know that Audi has said that it's got nothing to do with the whole situation in the group, but of course it does. So yeah, that's big picture stuff. That's all big picture stuff.
On the Audi, it's just the weirdest thing for me this weekend to see Matteo Binotto in his green Sauber shirt. Looked awkward, didn't it?
Yes. Yeah, I don't know what the color scheme is going to be. I've seen all kinds of renderings of Audi cars, but we'll have to wait until 2026 to see that.
Yeah.
It looks like black and red at the moment, but I'm not sure that that's going to stay.
Yeah, well, I just
Or
hope
grey.
it's next year. In the interim, 2025 is a bit better than this horrendous green that they've got at the moment. Really, in Las Vegas, the cars look much more attractive. It's sort of a muted green, but sort of a shaded one, faded. Looked so much better. Just get the car looking a bit better. Last year's Alfa Romeo delivery was spectacular. This year's really,
Yeah, well,
really.
it's dictated to by sponsorship.
No, you're right, but still. Anyway, just lastly, Ocon. getting his marching orders or negotiating his marching orders, let's call it that. Let's be diplomatic. And getting Doohan to, make his debut for Alpine much earlier than expected. That's quite an exciting development.
Yes, look, I mean, I think the Ocon Gasly combination has lasted much longer than most people expected because they came in as teammates who didn't like each other. They had a bit of a history between them from many years before as youngsters already. There were a number of explosive situations between the two of them. And then all of a sudden, 2 races ago, they finished on the podium together, and all was good. But I think in the end, it was inevitable. I mean, it wasn't a secret, of course, that Ocon is going to leave them and join Haas next year. That was announced a number of months ago already. So I think what Oliver Oakes said afterwards, that it was a win-win situation for all parties. I think that is absolutely true. That is exactly so. So all they needed to do was to negotiate, because you've got a contract as a driver to race for the full season. If the team wants to, the team and you want to leave before the end of the season, you've got to negotiate the terms of the separation. I'm not sure what the terms would be. That would be secret, because it's an employment situation. But so I think what they did do, they came to an agreement that it would be better for Ocon to go to Haas earlier, and that means the test straight after the race on Tuesday next week. It would be good for Haas to have him in there to help him with preparations, and it would be good for Alpine to have Jack Doohan in the seat to give him some race preparation, and to sort things out earlier rather than later. I see there are people who are writing that he's got this one-off opportunity to show what he can do. Implying that if he doesn't do well on Sunday, that seat is not his. Well, he's got a contract. Again, having said that, that doesn't necessarily mean that he's got that seat. If somebody comes with a big offer, who knows what the whole Red Bull situation is going to be like, or what Colapinto is going to be able to, all those sort of things. But at the moment, his seat is certainly not in danger. From anything that I can gather, there's no reason for Alpine to not stay with a contract that they have with him. And I cannot see anything on the horizon that could threaten that. So for people who think that Ocon has been fired, Doohan has been given one opportunity to show what he can do, that's so wide off the mark. It simply just shows that you don't know what's going on in Formula One. It's been a possibility for a long time already.
Yeah, no, he's definitely just going to make his debut earlier. That's it. He's racing next year. Get over it. Yeah, I agree with you. Interesting thing is he's one of 4 rookies on the grid next year. Now, Antonelli, Bartoletto, and Behrman, and now himself, Doohan. Behrman, not so much a rookie anymore, but still, after a year last year when nothing changed, suddenly it's all changed.
Yes.
But the one thing I'm actually looking forward to, and I'm a bit sad about it, and we've spoken about it before, is next week after the race, Carlos Sainz is going to be driving a Williams for the first time, and I mean, he mustn't be looking forward to that. I can't see him being excited about that.
Yeah, one can only surmise what goes on in the minds and the hearts of these guys. Obviously, going from Ferrari to Williams, not ideal, but at least he's got a race seat. At least he can continue, and at least, if he can contribute to a team and build it up over the next 2 or 3 years. And eventually get to a situation where they are competitive and we can again, compete for wins. I think it would be an achievement. I don't think he can look back necessarily at his time at Ferrari that he has built up something or that he has achieved something that wasn't there before. I'm not trying to be funny in any way. I mean, it's absolutely great for him to have raced for Ferrari, and it's the seat that most drivers would kill for. But did he build it up like Michael Schumacher did? No, he certainly did not. Did he assist in them becoming competitive? Absolutely. But it's not an achievement at the same level as a Schumacher, for instance, or as what the two McLaren drivers are doing at the moment for McLaren. What Alonso is hoping to do at Aston Martin. So, and maybe I'm grabbing at some straws here, but I think for Sainz, if it happens for him over the next 2 or 3 years, and he builds it up to, helps to build it up to a competitive level, I think that will be satisfaction enough for him.
He's a bit of his legacy. And talk about legacy, he's replaceable at Ferrari. Hamilton saying, or Lewis saying this weekend that he's not fast anymore. He seems so despondent. I mean, Ferrari must be, sort of getting a bit worried. What do you think?
No, I mean, we know Lewis. He's been around for so long, and we know that he what is the expression? He carries his heart at his sleeve. He shows his emotions. He shows his emotions. And when he's down in the dumps and he's depressed, then he shows it and he talks about it. He's done it many times over his career. Things have not gone well his way this season. That's absolutely clear. And yes, he is getting a little bit older now, and maybe, things are starting to build up in his mind. But Fred Vassier said, when somebody put that question to him, are you worried about him saying that he's not fast anymore? He said, just look back at the 50 laps that he did in Las Vegas to race from, where was he? From 10th on the grid to second place, was it?
No, not Hendrik. We can spend another hour. I'd love to talk to you about Alonso, for example. I think Alonso is not going to stick around much longer, my honest opinion. But, we'll talk about that next week. We'll do a bit of a review of the season as well next week. It's going to be something to look forward to. And a nice race and lots of excitement this weekend in Abu Dhabi.
Let's look forward to a great ending to what turned out to be a very, very interesting season.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. Okay, Hendrik, thanks. We'll talk again next week.
Cheers.